Greetings, 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 everybody. Hope everybody's doing great on this. I was starting to say Thursday afternoon, but I guess it's Tuesday afternoon. I'm trying to rush this week right along. So we're still missing a couple people. Let's see, we're looking at 21. Does anybody have any questions on any of the stuff we're doing while we're waiting?
How are you doing, Professor?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. I'm hot. My air conditioner broke and
Oh no!
I'm not pleased.
Oh no!
And
Do
this
you
has
have a
been going
fan?
on for like 3 or 4 days, and I've been dealing with the warranty on it. And at least we had a little bit cooler this weekend, because I become very unpleasant when I'm really hot.
Oh no!
But other than that, I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh good. I've actually been cold.
Oh, I tell you, people run around. They always make fun of me on campus because everybody else is in jackets and tights and sweaters, and and I'm in shorts and a short sleeve shirt. I think that it's just that in Texas we just don't get that cold. I guess maybe we're used to it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
I haven't been to Texas, but I've been to Tennessee, so I don't know if the weather is the same there too.
it's colder in Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah, they get more snow. We rarely get snow. North Texas gets it sometimes. So where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
if it snowed an inch, school got let out.
Oh.
We would just be looking for that snow, even just falling from the sky for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh. You miss it?
I miss Texas. Yeah, it's where my
Oh.
family's at, and it's where I grew up. That's all right. I like it here too.
Yeah, we
So,
appreciate having you here too.
well, thank you. That makes my day.
You're
So,
welcome.
okay, so we have our speaker that was supposed to be here tonight. Had to gracefully back out, because he had to do something with his family. So kind of left me with, what am I going to do with y'all tonight? So here's my plan. He's going to come. We don't have class next week, which you can use that time to work on your projects, because everybody should be available, during this time slot. So y'all should be able to hop up onto Discord or wherever it is that y'all meet up, Starbucks, wherever it happens to be, and, get some work done on your project. He'll be here on November the 8th. And he was in my morning class and the students really enjoyed it. So I know, because I was just going to play the recording from this morning, but I thought that's really not fair to y'all. So let me see what else I can do. So, so he's supposed to come the 8th. So what we're going to do tonight is your chapter this week is on distribution. And so I'm going to show you a really couple of good videos. One's a TED Talk, and then another one that just describes the different channels that really aligns very closely with your book. And then I'm going to give y'all the rest of the time after that to work on your projects. I like to give a lot of time because this is a very extensive project, and I hope that y'all make use of the time, that I'm giving you, because I know all of y'all are really very busy. Because I talked to a number of you, call me and tell me about, how busy you are. And I understand that. I was in your shoes, not, many years back, but I was in, graduate school with a 1-year-old and, working full time. So I know what you're going through. That's why maybe I'm a little bit more sympathetic than some of your other instructors, because I've been there, done that. But, again, I can't help you out unless you let me know what's going on. And I do know y'all all lead really busy lives. So I do like to give you some opportunities to work together in your groups while we're in class. Okay, so the first video I'm going to play for y'all is TED Talk. And hopefully I'm not going to have the unfortunate luck I often have with videos. Let me go to my email and hopefully we'll get this thing set up. Give me just a second. Okay. All right. Keep our fingers crossed here. Oh, there it is. That'll work this time. I hope.
I'm going to reveal to you the 12 steps to winning at marketing. And what happens next is that, well, there are only 4 steps. Create, share, some kind of magical process, and profit. In order to succeed in marketing, you have to create something representative of yourself and your audience and distribute it in the right way. In reality, there is some assembly required. The one idea I want to express today is that marketing is complex because it strives to understand human beings, and human beings are perplexing. But you have the tools to understand them. You just need to look for the right things, and there are 12 steps. We'll start with the voice. Who are you? What can you promise me, and how can you live that promise every day? Corporations may or may not have human rights, but they're filled with people who strive every single day to live up to the ideal of their organization. Red Bull has a loud voice, but it's not just loud. It's one of the strongest brand voices on earth, not just among beverages or pick-me-ups. Their promise is wings, an alternate reality where you can free fall from the edge of space at the speed of sound or perfect that kickflip. The people at Red Bull express their identity through dazzling content fueled with adrenaline. When I was embedded in their office, I observed the massive, dedicated team of data scientists, brand evangelists, gut-driven executives, and multimedia heroes who represented this voice from behind the edge of a blue and silver can. Their voice is just as strong as their visual identity. The field of visual identity was pioneered by Gordon Lippincott, a one-time engineer turned industrial designer who coined the phrase corporate identity and gave brands the storytelling capacity to compete in a crowded market. Lippincott introduced evolution. Brands aren't anything new. Merchants have been marketing their goods for centuries. But he literally wrote the book on design for business. And his production, from the Campbell Soup label to the Big G and General Mills to the pervasive and ever-consistent Coca-Cola brand globally, gave us a new idea of the promise that goods engendered in the marketplace. Paula Scher is one of the most prolific and active designers in the world, and she more than anyone knows that anyone has a challenge when bringing a story to life. In the comic here, there's a designer presenting her work to a client, and the client saying, "Why should I have to pay you so much if it only took you 10 minutes to make this?" To which she responds, "I studied for 10 years to be able to create this in 10 minutes. When Paula Scher was tasked with designing the logo of Citibank, she actually drew it on a napkin in less than a minute, and then she spent a whole year with boards justifying her intuition and her expertise, justifying the symbolism behind it, only to come back to an assembly that mirrored what was on the napkin in the first place. And this is because people have a strong attraction to trivial matters. It's actually called Parkinson's law of triviality. And what it means, it argues that organizations will give undue weight to trivial ideas. And it's something that no matter what assembly you're pursuing, you're going to have to contend with. Many of you will recognize this building. The Moorhead Planetarium houses the offices of the oldest merit scholarship in the country. And in their history, they've not only grown in network and promise, but they've also seen their example mimicked in other institutions. And despite their position as the first and the oldest, this necessitated the development of a brand identity and a differentiating line of implementation. This need evolved over time, as all things do, as their audience renewed and changed and had different values. So they tasked us with revitalizing the branding, and we analyzed and researched and drew upon the best practices of others and came up with multiple iterations that ultimately resulted in their most current, present expression. Branding should speak to an audience on an intimate level. It should evoke an emotional response. If it's intended to inspire, its purview should be grand. The colors, the font, the typography, even the space between the brand and the next thing on the page should exist solely to support your message. The Morehead Cane's audience is adaptive, and the branding needed to be adaptable. It needed to be built on the latest technologies. The website needed to be current, responsive, and flexible. So that whether a high school was looking at the website for the first time on their smartphone or an alumni was considering a generous gift from their tablet device, the gravitas of that institution was alive. If there's one thing that has completely revolutionized marketing strategy, it's the abundance and accessibility of data. Data today isn't just big, it's incomprehensible. The former chief scientist of Amazon.com said that in 2009, more data was created than in the entire history of the world preceding it. It's the proliferation of pocket computers that are all interconnected with sensors all over the world that have unleashed a flood of information so violent that even the metric system struggles to define it. Beyond the academic benefits of being able to see the price gouging of textbooks and the absurd rise of cost relative to consumer goods, data gives us insights into human behaviors. Marketing used to be driven by focus groups. But like the elementary particles in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle experiments, when we're observed, we change our behaviors. When we're speeding down the street and we see a cop, we slow down. If we're in a focus group of moms, we're unlikely to admit to sharing junk food with our kids. Social conversation is volunteered, on the other hand. It's a public declaration of our beliefs. We check into our favorite haunts. We spit vitriol about cable companies. And during the USA-Germany game in 2014, we let loose on a kind of unfiltered racism that's a direct line to understanding who people really are. My clients understand that data is the most powerful tool in their storytelling toolkit. Pfizer got rid of the Viva Viagra ads when they realized that men were searching on Google about questions about ED that were completely different from what they were saying on forums. We built a model for Warner Brothers that predicts future home video sales with 90% accuracy based on social conversation and public data. Red Bull will look to see what the most happening place on a campus is based on location service check-ins and send a wings team over to make it a party. The data exists because media channels have changed the way we consume and share information. If you haven't seen a PESO model in your marketing classes yet, you will. It stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned. And it stands for your advertising, which is scalable, your external endorsements, which are credible, your shared media property like social, which makes you authentic, and your website, which is where you define who you are. Campaigns have to be integrated today because your target audience never stays in one place and they all like different things. We worked with 180LA on a campaign called 2 Days to Beat for HP. They made a laptop for young people. It's a tablet and a computer in one, and they wanted to prove how powerful it was. So they recruited Clamps Casino to produce and Vic Mensa to MC, and they asked people to comment on YouTube and turn those comments into actual music. And they live streamed the creative process over the web for 2 days and showed how artists and millennials could bring a product to life through art. They surrounded their audience with this message. And the reason they were successful is it was born from hard work and insight. Sometimes the task is even greater. Dove used to be the #1 brand in men's body wash. Procter & Gamble was going to scrap the Old Spice brand, and my friend at Wieden+Kennedy knew that the audience, which was made up mostly of women who make the consumer decisions in the household, needed to be talked to. So they came up with this campaign. And it had kind of Keanu Reeves sort of character, surfer dude, speaking directly to the audience. But they hadn't defined the brand voice yet, not until this guy showed up and said, "Look at your man, now look at me, and now look back at your man, now look back to me." This is Isaiah Mustafa, and the rest is history. The steamy Old Spice Super Bowl ad went viral. Now here's the thing, they never actually aired this ad during the Super Bowl. This was the genius of the marketers over there. They called it USA Today and they said, "How do you figure out what you're going to include in your wrap-up?" And they said, "Well, we just go on YouTube and see what videos people are talking about." And they said, "All right, well, we're going to buy out all the ads for Old Spice Super Bowl commercial and get it into your wrap-up." And that got 40 million views. It was lightning in a bottle. It turned into its own meme. It won a ton of awards. Old Spice rocketed to #1 in the men's body wash category, and Isaiah Mustafa won an Emmy Award, and he showed it to me when I went and visited his house. It's a cool story. I'll tell you later. So if I learn all this now, I'm done, right? Kind of. New things will always emerge, but the one thing that will never change is that marketing is an effort to understand human behavior. Technology and media will evolve. The future of Facebook is it will become infrastructure like email, right? We'll use it to sign on to websites. And augmented reality like the Oculus Rift, which I tried last week, will change the way we consume media. I did not want to take that thing off. Mainstream adoption of new media will accelerate. The White House published their 2016 budget on Medium and GitHub. And if you don't know what those things are, they'll probably go away in a couple of years. It doesn't really matter. Language itself is evolving. The English that we use today is different from the English of Beowulf. Organizations will always try to co-opt the lexicon to connect with young people, and that's not limited to the National Republican Convention. No one watches TV anymore. Half of people are using a smartphone when they're watching TV, and the brand impression just doesn't come through. Half of online ads are actually not seen. Data from Google shows this. So what does this all mean for today's marketer? That traditional marketing techniques are ineffective, and that we have to become experts in digital, and that social media and analytics are part of the job. So let's bring this all together and show how we bridge to profit. Lap bands had been ignored by their parent company for 5 years, and declining sales and share of voice meant that they were losing out. So we did the analysis and found 3 key insights. Lap band was perceived as ineffective because of bad aftercare support from surgeons. Many patients were using a bad diet, and peer-to-peer recommendations were the most effective way in converting patients. So the approach was to teach the doctors, teach the patients, find the prospects, and surround them with messaging that can bring lap band into their life. So we introduced new advertising that was driven by patient stories we found in social media. My daughter can hug me fully. I can wear this dress again. It fits. And that became the tagline of the campaign. We connected those patient advocates with the potential patients. We gave them a new opportunity to have a platform to talk directly to the patients. We took their stories and put it in social media. We took those advocates and put them on the Dr. Oz show. And then when people went online afterwards to find out what this whole Dr. Oz lap band thing was, we had a bunch of paid advertisements that directed them to a customized experience on the website. And it was skinned as seen on Dr. Oz, and it had the brand voice, and it had that compelling story. And conversion fell out of this. It cost them less to convert than ever before. Every metric went up. But most importantly, they exceeded their sales target by 25%. It was all due to conversions, which Jackson Pollock so aptly illustrated. When things come together, even chaotically, the results can be beautiful. So what about that third step? Create, share, succeed. Success is a series of small wins, compounded by what you learn with every win. Effort and a discerning mind are the bridge to profit, accolades, rewards, mastery, or whatever outcome you hope to achieve. The process repeats itself, and successful people never view their success with finality. Every time, they ask better questions, and as a result, they get better answers and come closer than ever before to understanding human behavior. And you won't believe what happens next. Thank you.
Okay, now we got one straight on distribution. Give me 1 second to get it up. Maybe. Come on, where are you? There you go.
Distribution channels. Distribution channels are the means by which businesses get products to their consumers. Distribution involves links in a chain of distribution as products are sold between different businesses en route to the final consumer. There are 3 main types of distribution channel. 1. Direct to the consumer. 2. To the consumer via retailers. 3. To the consumer via wholesalers and retailers. Let me say a little about each of these. Firstly, direct. Niche products with relatively low volume sales are often sold direct. Direct sales could be made online, through mail order, or through shops owned by the manufacturer. Businesses selling direct do not rely on shops or other intermediaries to sell their product. Well-known examples of businesses that sell direct to the consumer are Direct Line, Insurance, and Dell, Computers. Distribution via retailers. Large retailers often purchase goods from manufacturers and sell on to consumers. This method of distribution is sometimes called modern distribution. Products reach consumers via one intermediary. Large retailers have enough buying power to negotiate bulk discount prices with producers. The producer benefits by being able to concentrate primarily on making the product without needing complicated distribution systems to supply thousands or millions of customers. Producers just distribute to a much smaller number of retailers. Distribution via wholesalers and retailers. This type of distribution channel involves at least two intermediaries, wholesalers and retailers. This is sometimes called traditional distribution. Wholesalers are businesses that purchase in considerable bulk from producers and then sell smaller batches to many different retail businesses. For instance, independently owned convenience grocery stores and pet shops usually buy their stock from wholesalers. Using wholesalers is an effective way for manufacturers to get products stocked in small retail businesses without having the transport costs involved in making small deliveries to each of them. What factors will influence which method of distribution is chosen? Decisions are influenced by the cost of distribution, the nature of the market, and the extent to which the producer wishes to control how products are marketed. As already mentioned, an advantage to producers of using wholesalers and larger retailers is that far fewer deliveries need to be made than would be needed if the delivery was straight to the consumer. This reduces the cost of distribution. On the other hand, each intermediary involved in the chain of distribution seeks to make a profit. The purchase price that retailers and wholesalers pay is inevitably less than the price that producers might charge if they were selling direct to the consumer. If customers are prepared to come to a factory shop or some other outlet controlled by the producer, then direct selling might look attractive. A classic example of this is the pick your own fruit farm. High volume mass market products have to be sold often to a very large number of customers. There's no such thing as a local toothpaste manufacturer, for instance. The market for this sort of goods is national or possibly international. For that reason, it usually makes sense to distribute mass market products through retailers. On the other hand, if a market has a smaller number of customers, direct distribution becomes more feasible. Producers of industrial goods like aeroplanes or industrial robots may seriously consider direct distribution because they have a small number of customers. Getting these products to the consumer is in some ways far less complex than delivering consumer goods to millions of people. Whenever a producer uses an intermediary to sell its products, it's handing a degree of control over promotion and price to the intermediary. This may be to the advantage of the producer. Being stocked in an established national retail chain can mean that the product is well promoted. On the other hand, the way that an intermediary, like a retailer, markets a product may not suit the producer. For some producers, only direct distribution provides them with the control over marketing that they seek. So, to sum up, distribution channels are the means by which businesses get products to their consumers. There are three main types of distribution channel: direct, via retailers, via wholesalers and retailers. Decisions made about how a product is distributed are influenced by the cost of distribution, the nature of the market, and the extent to which the producer wishes to control marketing. You might like to try this activity. Suggest, with reasons, the best way to distribute the following products: A. Double-decker buses, B. Washing powder, C. herbal remedies for dogs. To find out more, visit learnloads.com.
Okay, so that gave y'all pretty much the same information that, that you got in the text. Oh, hang on. I'm not sure why that's talking to me. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Anyway, it talked about a lot of the same things that are in the textbook. And I was just looking at some of the names. Are some of my grad students in here for that extra credit? Anybody? Okay, good. I sent an email out that the speaker was canceled, so I want to be sure that there wasn't anybody in here that thought it was the extra credit thing. Okay, we got one more to watch about kind of putting the distribution model into action, and then we're going to talk about the project. All right, here we go again.
When determining through which channels to place or sell a product or a service, we talk about using distribution strategy. However, before we start, let us just list the learning goals for this video. The goal is to understand what distribution strategy is, why we need to know about it, and how we could go about using it. We will do this through establishing a general understanding of the actual purpose of distribution strategy, and look at what might impact the success of our distribution channel choice. We will also provide an overview of some additional available tools and theories that we as marketers can use when determining the channel choice of a product or a service. So let's start. What is the purpose of distribution strategy? And what is the connection to the rest of the marketing mix? When you are asked to design the marketing mix, you need to make decisions on 4 or 7 core elements, also known as the 4 or the 7 Ps. First of all, any issues concerning the product. This would include packaging and all other elements in connection with the product. Secondly, a decision on price. Thirdly, you will need to decide on the place, which is what this video will address. We will also need to make a plan of which promotional activities we will carry out in order to tell our customers about our product and encourage them to buy. If we're dealing with an offering that is better described as a service, or perhaps a product that includes large elements of service, we might also want to look at the additional 3 Ps. The people that are involved in delivering the service, the process that our customers will go through in order to receive our service, and the physical evidence, any visible or tangible elements that the customer will see, hear, or in other ways experience when receiving the service. None of the 4 or the 7 Ps should be decided on in isolation. However, place is the P which we will focus on in this video. So, why is it important to make sure we choose the right distribution channels? Let us use an example. This business produces French cakes and desserts. In these modern production facilities, well-educated confectioners develop recipes and create delicious cakes and desserts ready to be sold and distributed to cake-loving customers. What will impact the success of the chosen distribution channels? And subsequently, which considerations are relevant when making their choice of distribution setup? Let us imagine that they had the idea of selling their cakes and desserts in rural areas through roadside self-service booths where customers were expected to show up, and purchase the products without any assistance. In this case, we could argue that they should first of all have considered some market factors. Firstly, what is the location and concentration of their customers? Is it likely that they will be able to sell to a suitable amount of customers with this kind of setup? Secondly, do their customers expect to buy these types of cakes and desserts at roadside booths? If not, it could be a challenge to convince them of the value in doing so. Thirdly, we would advise them to consider whether the customers would be able to get the information and service expected when using this type of setup. Our recommendation for French Cakes Corporation would, amongst other factors, depend on their answers to these questions about market factors. Let us imagine another scenario where French Cakes are considering establishing a chain of French Cakes cafes, through which they will sell their cakes and desserts. In addition to the market factors which we have already discussed, we as marketers would also advise them to consider some factors about themselves. Firstly, do they have the required resources to undertake such an investment, regarding both time, money, and people? Secondly, what level of control do they desire from their distribution channel? Owning the distribution channel gives ultimate control, but it comes at a price. Thirdly, we might discuss with them whether their product range is wide enough to meet customers' needs. So, our recommendations for this company would, amongst other factors, also depend on their answers to these questions about themselves. We could also imagine that the company were keen on creating an online web shop, where their customers could order their cakes and desserts and get them delivered directly to their homes. In addition to the market and producer factors which we have already discussed, we would also advise them to consider some factors about the actual products. Firstly, does the perishability, the fairly short shelf life of a cake or dessert, suit this type of distribution? Would they be able to deliver the product while it's still edible? Would there be ways of overcoming this obstacle? Secondly, are cakes and desserts suitable for handling in this way? And thirdly, with other types of products, complexity could be an issue. So, our recommendation for this company would, in addition to the factors already discussed, also depend on the answers to the questions about the actual products. We might also imagine that the company is keen on distributing their products through supermarkets in order to reach a large number of people from their target group in this way. In addition to the previously discussed factors, we would also ask them to consider some facts about their competitors. Firstly, which channels are their competitors using? And secondly, is it possible to achieve differentiation through choice of channel? Let us imagine that in one particular supermarket chain, consumers are not exposed to the competitors' cakes or desserts. Distributing the products through this chain would therefore enable them to differentiate from the competition and ultimately have a better chance of selling their products to the end consumers. So our recommendation for French Cakes Corporation would, in addition to the other already mentioned factors, also depend on their answers to these questions about the competitors. So, when advising the company on their choice of distribution channels, we would look at some market factors, some factors about the French Cakes Corporation itself, factors about the products, and some factors in connection with the competitive situation. And finally, we would look at the rest of the marketing mix to ensure that the choice of place corresponds with how French Cakes Corporation wishes to be positioned in the minds of the customers. We have now established the purpose of distribution strategy, what it is and why we need to know about it, and we have established that there are many factors which we need to look at before we can decide on the best place to distribute our product or service. So let's move on. In addition to the factors we have just discussed, we as marketers have some additional tools and theories we can use to guide us when determining which distribution channels to use. These will not be described in detail in this video, but let us just introduce an overview of some of the tools and theories we might want to use. We would determine whether we are dealing with consumer, B2B, and/or services distribution channels. Distribution intensity should be looked at. To what extent and in which context do we want our product or service to be available to the end consumers? Thirdly, we would consider whether to use independent intermediaries, setting up a franchise operation, or perhaps go for channel ownership. We should also look at the physical distribution system, which would include decisions on transportation of goods, inventory issues, and order processing procedures. If we're dealing with retail, we could also look at the process of retail differentiation. Finally, we should also look at how we could manage the relationships with our chosen distribution channels, so that it remains prosperous for both us and for the different parties within the channel. We have now established an understanding of the purpose of distribution strategy, the different factors that impacts our choice, and lastly, we have presented an overview of some additional tools and theories available to us when determining a suitable place to distribute our product or service. To learn more about distribution strategy and how to use the different tools and theories in
Okay, so that just kind of, a couple of those just kind of summed up distribution. I don't know if I told this story or told this analogy to y'all or not, so I'm going to tell it again because I think it bears repeating. But you know, we've not always had marketing, and as we talked about in some of the earlier classes, that marketing in healthcare was not done before the mid-70s because it was considered a learned profession, and learned professions, it was considered unethical to market. They felt like that people should come to you because you were good at what you did. So all that started changing as you've read several chapters back, and when they pulled away the control that they had over doctors and the control that they had over, you know, who was going to get sent to what, get referred to what hospitals. And so, and, you know, people began to start making their own choices. So then they had to shift their advertising towards the consumer. Now, back in, let's say, the early 1900s, there was only really one kind of distribution, and that was the people would go directly to the source and get it. And, you know, if you were in some far remote area, then maybe your supplies were delivered to a general store and you would go get it from the general store. But for the most part, flour was bought directly from the flour mill. You know, you bought eggs directly from the farmers. You bought, you know, everything was more direct. There really wasn't these distribution models. Then along came Henry Ford. Y'all know I love vehicles, so I always like to tell this story, and I particularly love Fords. And Henry Ford said everyone should be able to afford a car, and you know, it shouldn't just be for the very elite. So he came up with the assembly line, and when he came up with the assembly line, he was able, instead of creating 30 cars a month, you know, because were basically done by just a group of maybe 6 people that did it from start to finish, he created this assembly line where he could pump out hundreds, you know, of cars a day. And so once these cars started happening, then, you know, they had to have roads for them to drive on, because the same roads that were used for horses and buggies, you really couldn't use for the Model Ts and the Model As. You know, it would indeed be a very rough ride, and it would, the car wouldn't be able to hold up under it. So they had to start not paving necessarily, but clearing the roads in such a way that cars could drive on them. Well, when that happened, then you were able to then start transporting goods. So that was the creation of the traveling salesperson, because now that person could have a vehicle and he could go further than 3 miles, you know, in a day. And so that was when distribution started happening in more ways. You know, you were able to get your product further out, further away. You were able to, you know, get to another area that hadn't had advantage of being able to buy your product before. So distribution has been a long time in the making, and it applies to healthcare in the sense that how are you going to distribute your service? And once we had COVID, you know, that distribution changed drastically. There had always been ZocDoc, but, you know, the app, but they really hadn't been used that much. But once COVID came along and people didn't want to go into doctor's offices and expose themselves or to hospitals or anywhere else, so the apps became much, much more popular. So there you go, another level of distribution for healthcare. Also, doctors have started kind of improvising and making house calls for a price. They also have a lot, I've seen where doctors have their own traveling office, and they'll set up in a shopping center somewhere and people can come to them there, as opposed to a brick and mortar building. So distribution comes in to play in a lot of different ways. And like I've told you before, whether you're studying marketing in healthcare or you're studying marketing period, it's the same principles. You just have to adjust them to how they're being used in marketing. Okay, do I have any questions? Anybody? I'm going to ask again, are any of my graduate students here? It seems like I have more people in here than what normal. Okay, I guess not. I guess they want to sit and listen. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to put you on groups, and you have to stay for at least 20 minutes. So I'm not going to bring you back. Yay, Gina, thank you. So I'm not going to bring you back to the main room, but I am going to be popping in and out of your rooms, and I can tell when y'all disband early, and I will not be happy. And you don't want me happy when I'm fixing to grade something, or unhappy when I'm fixing to grade something. So be sure that you make use of this time. You can stay longer, of course, but I want everybody, all the groups, to stay at least 20 minutes. Now, do I have any questions before I send you out to your rooms? Okay, I'm going to open the rooms, and I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to